So, how does a military strike in the Caribbean light the fuse for a crisis in the Middle East? It sounds disconnected, right? But that's exactly what happened. A U.S. operation in Venezuela sent these massive shockwaves all the way to Iran. Let's get into it. Okay, so our story begins on a specific day, January 3rd, 2026. The place, Caracas. And what happened there, well, it changed the whole game in just a few short hours. This was the catalyst right here, a huge U.S. military op. They called it Operation Absolute Resolve. And its target wasn't just general infrastructure, it was aimed squarely at the very top of the Venezuelan government. And man, this thing was fast. I mean, really fast. It all kicked off at 2 in the morning. Explosions start ripping across northern Venezuela. By sunrise, you've got over 150 U.S. aircraft in the sky, just hammering key infrastructure. This paved the way for special forces to hit the ground in Caracas. And believe it or not, by the afternoon, it was done. Just like that. Now, we gotta be clear about something. This wasn't an invasion, with tanks rolling in to take over the country. Nope. This was a surgical strike. A highly targeted mission with one and only one objective: to capture President Nicolás Maduro. And they did it. But here's the thing. The government itself didn't just fall apart. The vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, she stepped right up, took charge, and immediately denounced the whole thing as a kidnapping. Okay, so you pull off a move like this, capturing the leader of a sovereign nation. How in the world do you justify that? What's the official story from the White House? Well, they gave it a name, the Donroe Doctrine. It's a play on the old Monroe Doctrine from the 1800s, right? That was all about telling European powers, hey, this is our backyard, stay out. But this new Donroe Doctrine, it's a whole different beast. It's basically an assertion that the U.S. can and will act unilaterally in the Western Hemisphere. It's a raw display of power, and it wasn't just a message for Latin America. It was a message for everyone watching, especially a country like Iran. But beyond all the official doctrine and the fancy names, President Trump himself, he was pretty blunt about it. He cut right to the chase and pointed to a much more tangible motive. And yeah, here's that motive in one number: $300 billion. That's barrels of oil. To put that in perspective, Venezuela is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet. We're talking about 17% of all the known oil in the world. That is an absolutely staggering amount. So you can imagine, this created a huge split. On one side, you have the U.S. saying, hey, this is just a law enforcement action, totally within the president's authority. But on the other side, you have, well, pretty much the rest of the world and a whole bunch of international law experts saying, no way, this is a massive breach of the UN Charter. You just violated another country's sovereignty. Right. So an event like this doesn't just happen in a bubble. The moment it went down in Caracas, the ripple effect was immediate, and it went global, pretty much forcing every country to pick a side. And this really lays out those battle lines perfectly. You've got the usual suspects, right? Russia, China, they immediately condemn it. Even regional neighbors like Brazil and Mexico were against it. On the other side, Israel comes out in support. But the one we really need to pay attention to here is Iran. Their condemnation wasn't just standard procedure, it was loud. And this is where everything pivots. This is the flashpoint. Riding high on the success in Venezuela, the White House almost immediately turns its gaze toward Tehran. And the message was, let's just say, not subtle. It was a direct threat. And hanging in the air was the unspoken part: we just did this in Caracas. Don't think we won't do it to you. Now you have to understand the timing here. This threat from the U.S. didn't land in a stable, calm Iran. Not even close. The country was already a tinderbox, dealing with some of the worst internal chaos it had seen in years. And the U.S.? Well, they just lit a very big match right next to it. I mean, look at this. The economy is an absolute freefall. The currency, the Rial, has lost 75% of its value in a single year. It's trading at 1.4 million to $1. Inflation is officially over 50%, but the real number is probably closer to 75. People can't afford to live, so they're in the streets protesting. And the regime? They feel that pressure, and they've stopped trying to calm things down. Now it's just a harsh crackdown on anyone they label a riot. And this chart really shows you that intensity in black and white. You can see the protests just exploding across the country. And look at that peak, 81 separate protest events on January 4th. What happened a day before? The Venezuela strike and the U.S. issuing its warning to Tehran. The timing is just incredible. So analysts are pointing out this really interesting, kind of counterintuitive thing. Think back to the 1979 revolution. Information was scarce, which actually made it easier for everyone to rally around one leader, one idea. Fast forward to today, everyone's got a smartphone. They're saturated with information from social media. And what's the result? It's much harder to get everyone on the same page. It creates a ton of different views, which means you don't get that one unified political force. So in a weird way, being more informed has made them less organized. So let's just recap. The regime is getting squeezed from both sides. You've got massive protests at home and a very real military threat from abroad. This brings us to the billion-dollar question, the ultimate strategic question. Is Iran desperate enough to play its trump card? Most experts think the answer is probably not, unless they have absolutely no other choice. They'd only take a step as drastic as closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is the world's most critical oil choke point, by the way, if the regime itself was about to be wiped out. So a few targeted airstrikes from the US, probably not going to do it. But a debellation war, and that's a fancy term for a war where the goal is to completely destroy the enemy state, yeah, that would almost certainly do. So here's where it all comes together. It's like a perfect storm of factors converging all at once. You've got the US, which has just proven it's willing to take massive direct action. You've got Iran, which is weaker than it's been in years because of the protests. The regime feels like it's in a corner with no good options. And then you throw in this last piece. Israel is apparently pushing for strikes on Iran's nuclear program. It's an incredibly dangerous mix. Which brings us right back to our original question, and it's a pretty unsettling one. A strike in the Caribbean lights a fuse that could set off an explosion in the Persian Gulf. It just goes to show how fragile everything is, how one move on one side of the board can put the other side on the absolute brink of war. All the pieces are in place, and now the whole world is holding its breath to see what happens next.